Hey, hello once again, fans, and welcome to High School Game Day here at the Missouri Sports Network, MissouriSportsNetwork.com, where everyone has a home field advantage. Coming to you live from the Peach Ranch studio. You're free to join if you'd like. Shoot questions at us here. We're pleased to be joined here on High School Game Day from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, writer at STLtoday.com, and STL High School Sports writer Dave Kvidahl. And Dave, hey, thanks so much for your time. It's been a minute.
It's been a long time, Guy. We've tried to connect earlier in the year and things just didn't work out, but I'm happy to be here now when it matters most, man. It's district
Hey,
semifinal week.
it is week 11, semifinals of districts, and a lot of great games going on out there this evening. And we were talking off the air a little bit about, uh, that DeSmet Troy Buchanan game, and
Mhm.
we've had Troy, and both coaches have been on the network here earlier in the season. And tell us a little bit about your thoughts there.
Well, I mean, Troy is, semifinalist last year, perennially struggled for a long time. And then Coach Ryan Nesbitt got a hold of the program about 6, 7, God, it might be 8 years now that I'm thinking about it, but a while back, and it's kind of really restructured that entire culture for the football program. They got a good class of seniors, led by Ja'Kai Lang, who is a two-way guy for them, committed to the University of Missouri. He's a defensive end primarily, but he's also, I want to say, playing left tackle for them this year. They got a really dynamic two-way or a a dual threat quarterback, I should say, in Charo Sutton. Brett Smith is a linebacker running back. Nick Bova is a linebacker running back for them. They've been really, really solid this year. Their 2 losses have come week 2 over across the river in Illinois to a really good O'Fallon team that we had in our top 5 preseason countdown. And then to Francis Howell, who's gunning for the final in Class 5 this year after dropping down. So I expect Troy to be really, really good. But as we were talking about, DeSmet's strength of schedule, I mean, it's out of this world. I mean, on it, you've got the CBC game because that's always there with the conference, but they played IMG Academy. They didn't know if they were going to get a week 1 because the team they were supposed to play backed out on short notice. They met in Indianapolis to play a team out of Ohio who was really, really good. So they've been really they played East St. Louis week 9 to wrap up the regular season. So I'm curious to see what this DeSmet group can do. They're on their 3rd head coach in 3 seasons, which is a very tough way to go about it. They did bring in a lot of kids when Trinity High School closed it would be after their sophomore seasons, the seniors now. So that's a group that's they've got some talent, they've got some pieces, they've got some really interesting things going for them. I'm just kind of curious what they can do against a really good Troy team tonight out at Troy.
And remarkably, this may be the first time these two teams have played this century.
That's as far as our website can tell us. That's the first time it would have happened. I mean, I know DeSmet has been, really, really, I want to say really good. They won their first title in like 05, I want to say. So, but Troy, like I said, hasn't been particularly competitive for a long time. So I don't know why they'd ever have a reason to cross paths. And they certainly weren't lumped together in a district tournament at any point up until now.
You mentioned Francis Howell earlier there in Class 5, and it's that's probably the class of that side of the state in Class 5. We're down here, it's Carthage, and I look for those two to meet. I thought they'd meet maybe last year, but of course Francis Howell wasn't in the Class 5, and Carthage didn't get out of their district after beating Webb City in the regular season. Webb City got him in the district. I don't think that's going to happen this year. Francis Howell, are they the best Class 5 team up there?
They are certainly the best Class 5 team we've got around these parts. They're our number 3 large school behind only East St. Louis in Illinois, and then CBC's at number 2. So, yeah, the Vikings are really, really solid. They haven't played a whole lot of tight games this year. They played a pretty solid schedule. They beat a Lutheran North team pretty good. I got to see them there. Brett Norfleet, another University of Missouri recruit, tight end, defensive end. He's a big old honking kid, probably about 6'7". And he's pretty quick. He's got long reach with those long arms. Apparently a really great pitcher, too, who has decided to put baseball aside, focus on football. So he's kind of their main guy. But they got Brady Holtman as a 2-way standout for them at linebacker, running back. And Coach Brent Chinaki, I think he's on year 5 out there at Howell. And they lost to Troy in a spectacular district title game last year that allowed Troy to go on to the Class 6 semifinals. I mean, it was a last play of the game kind of deal, and the Vikings were on the short end. This year, they got the revenge win over Troy, and now they don't have to worry about them again as they march into Class 5. So I certainly expect Francis Howell to be knocking on the door. Now, I think the way the bracket shakes out, they would potentially see Carthage in the semifinals. I think they're on the opposite side of the bracket that way from the other side of the state. So I'm curious to see what that would look like. But certainly Francis Howell has high expectations and has lived up to all of them thus far.
As you look at that Class 4 St. Mary's team, and I believe they're Class 4.
They are.
I saw some things earlier this year where this may be their last year. They may be closing their doors at St. Mary's, but they've got an opportunity here to go out with a state championship, and I don't know that there's any Class 4 team better than them in the state.
Well, St. Mary's has been really, really good. Now, last year they were overwhelmingly good. And I've talked to Coach Ken Turner a little bit about this year. They don't have the same amount of depth. And Kevin Coleman, who was the player of the year in the area last year with Luther Burden, who I'm sure Mizzou fans are very familiar with by now, he's off at Jackson State playing for Coach Deion Sanders. So they're not nearly as explosive as they were a year ago. They're also leaning on Jamal Roberts, another University of Missouri recruit, by the way, who has been a ground and pound guy for them. I mean, he's really, really been solid. So they went from an explosive kind of air it out and run it kind of team to they're gonna win the line of scrimmage and pound that football. And Roberts has scored, I think, 5 touchdowns multiple times this year, and their schedule is by no means light. I mean, they lost 2 games this year, and they lost in Chicago to a Class 8A school, Nequa Valley, and they went to Louisville and played a Trinity team down there whose record isn't pretty, but they're another really, really good program that plays anybody and everybody when they can. So I would be surprised if the Dragons don't make a pretty stiff run. Now, I will say I got to see Hillsboro play Cardinal Ritter earlier this year, and Hillsboro in Class 4 District 1, that's who St. Mary's would potentially see in the quarterfinal round. So I'm interested to see how that would work because Hillsboro likes to run that rock too. They got a really good good group on the line of scrimmage up there, clearing the way, and they got a handful of running backs who can really tote that rock. So Hillsboro would be interesting. I'm curious if they could make St. Mary's sweat a little bit. But then again, Rockwood, Summit, and Union are on the other semifinal in St. Mary's district, and both of those teams have been very good as well. So the path is not easy by any stretch, but St. Mary's certainly is the favorite to make its way through the bracket and take its chance in the championship.
Yeah, and then you've got just a little bit to the north, maybe a Hannibal team that could maybe make some noise with who they have in the backfield.
Aeneas Williams is he's got something that I hadn't seen a whole lot of until I got to see a lot of Luther Burden last year, and that people can't tackle him. I mean, I got to see him play that Troy team we were talking about earlier on a Saturday night. And that game, like it's Troy isn't that far from Hannibal. So that was a big crowd, good game. It got delayed by a thunderstorm that came through. So it wasn't the cleanest night ever, but Aeneas was absolutely fantastic and every bit of a 5-star player. 2-way guy again, running back, linebacker, dynamic presence. He's really special. And that Hannibal team around him is not bad either. I mean, I was very impressed by their sophomore quarterback who, despite interception, a fumble, like a bad snaps, he just kept working for the next play, and they were in that game to the end. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Hannibal put together a nice little run too on the opposite side of the bracket. That could be a lot of fun. I mean, they were in the title game a year ago after Aeneas had a huge sophomore year. So no, Hannibal's very, very good.
Going down now, you mentioned Cardinal Ritter earlier, and that's a team that folks down here at the Class 3 or maybe looking at as that's who they're going to have to beat if you're going to get a state championship.
Well, I was looking at the bracket, and this, like Cardinal Ritter, like their path is rough. I mean, they would have a Valley in a quarterfinal, and then you're looking at maybe Maryville or I want to say Savannah in a potential semifinal. Like they're going to have to earn it. Whoever comes out of that side of the bracket, I mean, they're really going to be battle tested. So I would be surprised if Cardinal Ritter doesn't get there because they have been so dynamic. I mean, defensively, I think they gave up 30 points all season in 9 games. They shut out Lutheran St. Charles, who won Class 2 last year and is looking to make its own run in Class 3 this year. I mean, they got a tough Lutheran North team tonight in their district semifinal. But Cardinal Ritter's been the real deal. Their running back safety, Marvin Burks Jr., just committed to Ole Miss. Their wide receiver, Frederick Moore, has been a Michigan recruit. They picked up a sophomore quarterback and his older brother, Ryan Boyd, and oh, I just lost his nickname's Cart. Oh, I can't remember. Oh, Carson. Carson Boyd is the quarterback who's been very dynamic since they've installed him. He's a bit more of a runner than Antoine McKay Jr. had been their previous junior quarterback. So they have all the things going for them. They've made two consecutive semifinal appearances. 2018, they lost the title in Class 3 to that really good Trinity team. So Cardinal Ritter's been knocking on the door, and they think this is their year to go. But again, you got a Valley team that's itching to get back to prominence. You got a Maryville team who, if not for a late field goal block, probably beats Lutheran North in a really great game earlier this year. So Cardinal Ritter is really strong, but their path is very tough.
Their games, you talk about tough path. Class 2 down here, where you've got the Lamar, and you've got Seneca, and you've got Blair Oaks, all in this general area. And I think one of those three, I don't know much about the Class 2 teams out of your area, but I would think one of those three teams is going to have to win the state title.
Well, looking at it, Blair Oaks is the heavy favorite on the left side of the bracket, and I would be surprised if Lamar doesn't put together a run on the right side of the bracket, and that would be a championship game. And what a humdinger I'd expect that to be. So no, I mean, those are two really great teams. We don't have a whole lot in Class 2. I'm just looking at my notes. I mean, we have a Priory team that's not bad. They're going to play Lift for Life in their district semifinal tomorrow. That regular season game didn't go the way they hoped it would. The Priory, I should say, the Ravens. So Lift for Life is an interesting group. They won their first district title a year ago. That's a school that has no home field. It's a charter school. They're in the middle of the city. They're landlocked, so they play all road games all the time. They practice in a public park because they have no place to practice. And they're a skeleton crew. I mean, they generally have about 28, 35 kids on the roster, depending on injuries and whatnot. So they're a unique animal, but they certainly aren't comparable to the likes of Blair Oaks or certainly Lamar. So I would be surprised for anybody around here to make a run to the quarters or semifinals. But Blair Oaks and Lamar certainly lines up to be a hell of a Class 2 championship game should we get there.
Yeah, it's games like that I'm paying attention to. I've kind of gotten close to the Seckman high school coach Nick Bear, and he's been on the show a few times. I know they've got a Marquette team that's going to be a tough matchup for them. Also Vashon, another coach that I'd been close to, but I think he may have a chance a little bit just to get out of his district maybe. What do you think about Vashon and their opportunity to maybe get out of that district?
Well, they certainly have a shot to get out. They're going to play an interesting Parkway North team tonight. They have a guy at quarterback who's more of that throw it once in a while, but really run it kind of quarterback guy. And Karan Williams, he's committed to University of Miami, Ohio, Miami, Ohio. That's where he's headed. So they lost their sophomore quarterback who'd been really good for them. He suffered a season-ending injury a couple of weeks back. So I'm curious to see what they can do. But that Vashon group, De'Air Hill Jr. is their sophomore running back safety he was our breakout player of the year last year for football. He was part of their state basketball championship team. He's a guy who you see him in the football field. He looks like a freshman because he's about 5'8" and he wasn't that big. But then you see him in his basketball jersey, and the guy is built like a brick house. I mean, he is a physical specimen. So they've got some other talented pieces around them. And like you said, Coach Will Franklin, like he built their schedule this year. I mean, they won at Kirkwood in week 1 because De'Air Hill ran wild. They won at Fort Zumwalt North this year. They lost to North County in a quarterfinal last year, but that was the furthest game out of town that they played. They weren't used to getting on the bus for a while and going to play somebody tough. So this year they tried to do a little bit more of that. So I'm interested to see what Vashon can do, because this is the time of year that, Coach Franklin was aiming for them to be at their best. And they certainly have been tested to be prepared for this run. Now, high school kids this time of year and the weather as we're looking at games being moved and shifted. If it gets to raining tonight, that ball gets slippery and weird stuff happens.
Yeah. Are there games, in this area in Southwest Missouri or even in the Kansas City area that you've got your eye on as a possibility of, hey, this is someone that the St. Louis teams may run into, maybe it's a Class 6. Nix is playing Ray-Pec. tonight at Nixa, and Coach Perry, who's a dandy, earlier today said, "No, we're not moving it. They're driving 3 hours. We're not going to move this game. We may not get over till 2 in the morning, but we're going to finish it tonight." And
I respect that. No, but the shuffling that you hear a lot about is so hard to do is just the officials, like getting guys to come out and officiate the game, because you figure that you only have so many crews available, and then they're set on this day, and then if you push it to Saturday, then you have to blow that plan up and start shuffling people here, there, and everywhere. So I understand, like lightning on a Friday night in particular is just an absolute nightmare for those fellas. So I hope they can get that hashed out. But to be quite frank, Guy, I haven't really looked at the other corners of the state because I got my eyes on so much stuff going on around here. But I will say, Coach Bear at Seckman has the best coaching mullet I've crossed paths with this year. He's got that long flow and stuff. I'm not quite. I can't do it. My hair gets a little longer than this, and I got to trim.
Well, he's Dr. Bear.
Where is he now?
He is a doctor, and it's I've had great opportunity to talk to him. They got that win last week over SLU. Talked to him after the game, and he was excited about it. And I said, what have you got? What's on deck now? He goes, well, I'm heading to the bar right now. and that was he was a great interview. But they of course they've got that challenge now with Marquette. But
I have to say, if you can beat St. Louis U High, who is the third best team in the Metro Catholic Conference this year behind CBC and DeSmet, you can play with a lot of teams. Now, Marquette is going to be very good. That's a team that made the district final last year, brought a lot of guys back that are hungry to try and get that first district title in school history. But Cole Rubel, as I'm sure you guys discussed, is pretty dynamic. 43 touchdowns, I want to say, 2,300 yards rushing. Another guy who's a running back that occasionally throws it, so we call him a quarterback. So I'm really interested to see what Seckman can do, because if you can beat SLU High, you can hang with Marquette. And people just don't understand that when you're a team that's used to playing teams that like to throw the ball, and your corners and your safeties are out doing things and guarding in space, and then you match up with somebody who just wants to pound that rock every time, you can't get used to that in a week. You spend all offseason preparing for teams that like to throw it, and then you get a team that wants to run it down your throat. That's a completely different way to play football for a lot of these guys. So Seckman is a really, really tough matchup. And Rubel, who's headed to Southeast Missouri State as a running back, he's about the only guy doing what he's doing around these parts. I mean, nobody else has crossed that touchdown barrier, and that 2,000-yard rushing mark is pretty remarkable.
And we've got a game here tonight that actually is tomorrow now. They moved it with Republic going to Webb City. That game may take an hour and 15 minutes. I mean, both of them are just going to hand the ball off, and it's going to be time possession. And that's what Republic did when they beat Nixa. Their first drive was 10 and a half minutes long. They ran 79 plays in that game to Nix's 34. And, I mean, it was unbelievable. There's the time possession, and then they win it in overtime on a 2-point conversion. So they're playing really well right now. Republic is, but that district is I think it belongs to Carthage. Carthage is the best team down here, I think, especially in Class 5, but maybe at all levels, even though they lost to Nixa earlier this year. But we shall see. But Dave, as always, I appreciate you being generous with your time here today. I know you've got to get out to Troy to watch that game. We'll be looking forward to the tweets and stay dry. And I had a buddy of mine told me, this is years ago when I was doing Twitter, I said, it's going to rain. What am I going to do with my phone? I said, take a Ziploc bag, stick your hands inside the Ziploc bag with your phone, and that's how you do it. So I've got my Ziploc bag already. I'm going to run over here at 5 o'clock and watch the ball over McDonald County. They're kicking off at 5 today. So it's going to be a long night of football.
I have to tell you, taking notes in the rain is no fun. The paper tends to melt.
Yes, indeed. Well, Dave, how can people follow along with you tonight? I know we at Missouri Sports Network, we do a lot of retweeting, but if they want to just connect right to you, what's your handle?
My handle is at David STLHSS, STL High School Sports. So you can catch me on Twitter. I will have scoring updates as things happen tonight, and hopefully we get the game in before it's too wet.
All right, very good. Well, hey, stay safe out there tonight. Stay dry. And as always, the Missouri State Highway Patrol reminds us, take that 3 seconds and buckle up. 3 seconds. It could save your life. Be safe, be smart, and be here tomorrow. Dave, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Guy.